So rising levels of unemployment and also poverty and the oil crisis that I talked to you about, all these were leading to stagflation. And stagflation was again contributing to the rise of these things. So, what you need to understand here is that at this time, a number of economists um got involved in trying to find a solution. They identified the reasons for the problem and what you and I, or rather, why should you get co opted? You might have a different view on this, so I shouldn't co opt you. What I have been calling welfareism of the state in Europe was being described as socialist measures, socialist measures of the state. Okay, prominent among the people who talked this, who used this language, was who is an Austro-British economist. Um, and Fredrick Hayek, most people will tell you, is a classical liberal, but not most. At one time, people would have told you that he was a classical liberal, but with libertarianism taking over the mantle of classical liberalism, he came to be called a libertarian economist. And in his new essays, he uses this term on himself, the libertarianism part. So he uses this term on himself. But what we actually find is a resurgence. Okay, much before the stagflation happened, the resurgence started because uh, there were indications uh, that the economies were headed in the direction of stagflation, and therefore a resurgence of laissez-faire economics happened in Europe. Okay, now there are a number of economists that we can talk about. Hayek is a well-known figure because for various reasons he gets, even though his main discipline and his main focus is economics, he also gets recognition for his political ideas and for his sociological ideas. So he's the face of all this thing, this process that happened, uh, the laissez-faire economics. You know what the laissez-faire economics are. I've talked to you about laissez-faire economics. I'll talk to you about them in greater detail when we do John Locke. Uh, but for now, let's try to understand what is laissez-faire. Laissez-faire is the state being pushed back and free market economy being pushed forward. Now, please remember when we talk about this free market, this is not the free market that had been conceived of by people like Adam Smith or even John Locke. This is a slightly different version where you do recognize the necessity for some kind of regulation, but you would want to keep economic regulation to the lowest, to the minimum, that which is unavoidable. So the free market, as it was envisioned originally, has never ever been realized. It has never ever been realized. But what we do see is that a variation of it, with, what do you say? Um, a variation of it with emphasis upon minimal regulation and minimal interference from other sources, including the political and the social. That particular thing happened. So, because of Hayek's, what should I say, multiple faceted personality, and I use that in a very respectful and yeah, and I use it in a respectful way because of that kind of his ability to dab in things other than economics and do it quite well at that is what led Hayek to become the face of this activity. But there are other people as well, okay, not as well known as Hayek. These people are people like William Buchanan. William Buchanan is one of the people, and another one is Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman, and perhaps very importantly, Walter Lippmann. In fact, Walter Lippmann is actually quite famous, and he's famous for many reasons. One of the many reasons for which he is actually famous is that Walter Lippmann conducted a colloquium of economists. I hope I've got colloquium right. I hope that is a correct spelling. He created a colloquium. I'm not going to go into that because one, I don't understand that depth of economics. It's very, very deep. Two, because we don't really need to. And three, we are running out of time. So, therefore, I'm not going to go into the details of what transpired in the colloquium. But what is interesting is all the names that I have mentioned were part of the colloquium, which is a get together of sorts and exchange of knowledge. And it was in the it came to be called the Walter Lippmann Colloquium. That's what it came to be called. And this particular colloquium actually set the agenda for the laissez-faire capitalist economy to take over once again from, I don't want to use the term socialist, that is not a term that is correctly used. Uh, One doesn't know if these people actually talked about it as socialist or not, but I doubt very much if any of them would have used the term socialist. Okay, so let's just call it welfarist. So the welfarist economics started going back. I told you when I was talking to you about Rawls, while talking to you about Rawls and while I had made a reference to John Locke says that capitalism is a solution to poverty. And he says that though there are greater inequalities in capitalism, the position of the lowest rung of people in a capitalist society is far, far better than the position of the lowest rung people in pre-capitalist societies. So he says the gap between the rich and the poor might increase. Locke, this is not Rawls, this is Locke. This is laissez-faire capitalism. He says the gap might increase, but because of generation of social wealth, okay, unfettered capitalism, he believed, will uh, increase the generation of social wealth in a substantial manner. And because of that, there would be this whole prosperity levels of society going up. So people in the lowest rungs are better off in a capitalist society despite the increase in inequality, which is not entirely untrue. This is also called the trickle down effect. And I gave you how the trickle down effect works when I gave you the example of the setting up of the high-tech city in Hyderabad, and Bangalore is perhaps an even better, or I should say Bengaluru. Um, um, Bengaluru is an even better example. It's a very similar example, except that Bengaluru didn't see the levels of development that Hyderabad had seen prior to the digital economy coming in, and it hadn't grown to the size that Hyderabad grew prior to the digital economy. Today, Bengaluru has become the fourth biggest city, or is it? Sorry, it's the fifth biggest city, and Hyderabad, which was the fifth biggest city, has now become, in terms of population, the seventh biggest city, and in terms of area, it is the fourth biggest city. Okay, it's bigger than Bengaluru. It is bigger than Chennai. It is better than Mumbai, bigger than Mumbai, and also it is bigger than uh, Kolkata. And you'll be surprised to know that the second biggest city in terms of size is Gorakhpur in India, a place that is not known for anything. Anyway, but that kind of unimportant information aside, uh, let us get back to this whole idea of the laissez-faire and the trickle down. So if you take what had happened now, Bengaluru and Hyderabad, despite the fact that Hyderabad has lost its fifth position and has got pushed down a little, despite that, you will find that the growth has been phenomenal. The growth has been phenomenal. Bengaluru has managed to overtake Hyderabad, not in software terms. Software terms, Hyderabad is more or less equal to, or the digital economic terms, is more or less equal of Bangalore, but it has overtaken Hyderabad because of the fact that around Bengaluru there are a number of manufacturing facilities, like Toyota has its factory. Toyota Kirloskar Motor has its factory in Bidadi, which is on the which is in the outskirts of Bengaluru, and then you have the TVS setting up its own manufacturing plant on the Bengaluru Mysuru road, which is very close to Bengaluru, and then you also have uh, the advantage of Narsapur is yet another place where some manufacturing activity is happening. And you must understand that even now, the auto industry is one of the prime drivers of the economy. And the reason why Pune is doing so well as a city is because of the fact that both these three places, Bengaluru, Pune, and Chennai, they have a robust auto manufacturing uh, facilities. Okay, it's now happening a bit in Andhra Pradesh, thanks to the foresight of Kiran Kumar Reddy. Kiran Kumar Reddy understood the fact that, if you try to locate things in Hyderabad, then we don't have an access to a port. And so he developed the Sri city in the Chittoor district. And he was also instrumental in developing the Krishnapatnam port, which is very close to the Sri city, which is a special economic zone. I'll be talking about that when we talk about this whole neoliberalism thing. And then mm, Chennai port is just about 80 kilometers. So that's the reason why people have gone there. Uh, and there are, for example, it's not just automobiles. Foxconn has a hardware manufacturing facility there. I don't know if you know this, Foxconn. Foxconn is the company that does the maximum amount of manufacturing of hardware for cellular phones, and not just cellular phones, also towers and equipment that is required to bounce the signals from one place to another. So you see, Foxconn has set up its shop there. Isuzu is there. Nearby is Kia. So that is also developing. So we've lost out completely in the manufacturing sector. We don't have a single company manufacturing anything here properly. Okay, whatever manufacturing is there, that is the defense thing, but that is not manufacturing, it's research. But the high-tech city, to come back, I gave you the example, the creation of this led to so many different kinds of jobs. Okay, and that is exactly the case with Bengaluru, only perhaps uh, with double the effect. Okay, uh, so suddenly Bengaluru, which was actually called a place for retired people, and I remember in my childhood visiting that place, and there used to be hardly anything. There used to be hardly any traffic. It is just a beautiful place, lots and lots of trees, and wonderful climate, not salubrious. Because of the pollen, it was not a good climate for people who had breathing problems. So I can't say climate was salubrious, but it was, it hardly ever crossed 34 or 35 degrees centigrade in uh, maximum temperature in the peak of summer. In the peak of summer. Okay. Now it is not like that. It has gone up to 42, 43. There are no trees. And the place, Hyderabad at least, has very wide roads, which you can't say about Bengaluru. The Bengaluru is full of narrow roads. In the morning, you get up, you go in one direction. In the evening, you think I can go back in that direction. They'll tell you no. Evening, it is this direction. So they have all these things to cope up with the developmental activity that happened, and with development and with industries rising up. uh, you would find that uh, there is greater employment, um, all kinds of employment. I told you, even if the industry is a hardcore IT industry, you still have IT enabled services. You have cabs, so, and you have drivers, you have watchmen, you have all kinds of people involved in the process. So that also has led to migration of labor. The funny part is, labor is not available in South India as it once was. Because if you are either from Kerala or from, now you can say, Telangana and even Andhra Pradesh, uh, if you look at that, you will see that this labor has migrated mainly to uh, the Middle East, the West Asian countries, especially the Emirates and also Saudi Arabia. Okay, so the labor has gone there. And in Karnataka, the labor is not available to the extent that they want, because of the fact that, unlike here, where Hyderabad is the only developed place now, in Karnataka, Mysuru is also developed, as is Mangaluru. So labor got spread out. So that's the reason why both white collared, blue collared, and even absolute laborers, no collared laborers, are all going to Bangalore. That's the trickle down effect. Okay, so that's the trickle down effect that we talk about. So people have good wages, they have pretty good wages. Those wages they never earned in their life. Okay, and I'll come to this point when I start talking about India. Now, the colloquium of economists, of which all these people were part, Walter Lippmann's colloquium of economists, these people and a few more, let's not get into names because I'm not going to talk about their theories. They all supported the idea of a laissez-faire capitalism with a free market. Okay, so please remember now, whenever I'm using the word free market, it is not in the original sense of the term that Adam Smith and uh, John Locke used. Okay, free market is minimum regulation, but you do have to file. You do have to file your papers with the respective governments. You have to get lots of clearances, environmental clearance. You have to get clearances for foreign exchange. Okay, so all those things, all those tendencies are those which you find in laissez-faire and free market economics. So it is not that unregulated kind of thing, but it is absolutely minimum regulation. Now, you must also understand that Narendra Modi's slogan, which says "Make in India," and that I told you what has been happening in India, though we call it the manufacturing sector, it is only an assembly and not the manufacture of parts. See, you must understand one thing. If you take a product, a washing machine, um, what should I say, a refrigerator, or if you take um, a mixer, grinder, if you take all these things, there is a brand on them. It says it belongs to this brand. Okay, it says it belongs to this brand. At one time when we talked about mixer grinders, it was this particular brand called Sumit. It seems to have vanished, or I don't know. Now, what you have to understand here is that anything that has multiple parts, well, if Prestige is making pressure pans and pressure cookers, there are only two things in it. Okay, one is the cooker or the pan, and the other is the lid you put on top of it, right? So there is no assembly thing which is so important there. But as the products get complicated, you require many products and you don't manufacture any of them. You set up ancillaries. You basically set up ancillaries. So when you set up an ancillary, what happens is that the production of the parts that go on to make the whole being whatever, a washing machine, a refrigerator, somebody manufactures the compressor, or an air conditioner, somebody manufactures the compressor, somebody manufactures, if it is an air conditioner, the fan unit in it, somebody makes the plastic or fiber casings. Okay. Similarly, for a refrigerator, somebody makes the shelves, and ultimately it is sold as X or Y or Z product. We think they are all being made by one company. No, they're not being made by one company. They are not. And when this laissez-faire and free market economics came into being, they also talked about a very important concept called on-time inventory. Please remember that factories that do not manufacture the parts, for example, let's take the automobile industry. That is always apart from my love and fascination with automobiles, which is now going down because I don't think this electric thing is a very good thing, but that's a part. It's nevertheless a very good example. You see, somebody makes the tires, somebody makes the rims on which you will put the tires, somebody will make the suspension components. Right now, all these things are in the auto industry. Very few of them are coming from India. Okay, so the ancillary industry is not very powerful, except with the Tata Group and to a certain extent Mahindra, because these are homebred people and who have over the years developed their own ancillaries. But you might have noticed that there is a big quality difference. Mahindra products are, you know, They're like prehistoric. Uh, Tata products lack the finesse that you would find in uh, cars or whatever made by Hyundai or by Toyota. They have very good quality interiors. All parts are extremely uh, of extremely good quality. There are no rough edges, but you'll find rough edges here when it comes to our own homebred manufacturers. Bajaj makes its own this thing, but it's it's not bulletproof like the Japanese motorcycles are. They are not bulletproof. Uh, so if you look at these things, then so that is the reason why the Make in India slogan. Uh, for once, I'll say something good about the Prime Minister. Uh, is an attempt to create the ancillary industry. It is an attempt to create the ancillary industry, and the importance of Foxconn in Sri City in Andhra Pradesh is something that cannot be overemphasized at all, because they are developing the ancillary industries. They are actually tutoring the manufacturers of components that go into the telecom equipment, whatever it might be. It might be just your phone handset, it might be a transmitter, it might be a tower, it might be any of those things, radio frequency bouncer. It could be any of these. They are tutoring people. They are actually tutoring people. Just, they are actually tutoring people to make them of good quality. So unless we catch up with quality, we are not going to be able to uh, basically have a real manufacturing sector. But to come back to the laissez-faire economics, they said there should be a coordination between the brand that puts out a product into the market and the ancillaries, so that you don't have a piling up of inventory. If you have a piling up of inventory, it creates a lot of confusion. Okay, I don't know if any of you watch TV. Now, thanks to Amazon and all these things, I don't know if people are watching TV, but Discovery Channel has programs on mega industries. That's what it calls them. Okay, mega industries. And if you see that program, you'll see how the on-time inventory works. Okay, which means you should not have a piled up inventory with you, because that will cost the company money, because you have to create a separate space for that. And you could end up mixing the parts. You could end up mixing the parts. If it is on time inventory, which is if today I need so many for today's production, I need these many parts from each of the ancillaries. The ancillaries will send them. The ancillaries will send them to the company on time when they require it for that day. So the inventory doesn't pile up. And if there is a slowing down in the market, then the ancillary industries are also intimated by the main manufacturer that don't produce too much. Cut your production by so and so percentage because we are seeing a dip in sales, or we are forecasting a dip in demand. Okay, so that's what is the thing that you have to understand. So they suggested this on time inventory in order to maximize profits, in order to maximize efficiency. Okay, so this is now a global model. It's a global model. Everybody uses an on-time inventory so that they don't have a backlog and incur unnecessary costs and make things profitable. That is the bottom line. Make things profitable. So you have rising levels of unemployment and poverty, you said. That is because of the fact that there was the too much uh, intervention of the state, too much of welfareism, uh, according to them, not according to us. And also, please remember that most of these European nations are creditor nations. You must understand that there is no point in talking about socialism and communism in this world. Why? Because there has been an integration of the global economy. When did this happen? It happened during the time of capitalism rising. Okay, which led to colonialism. Lenin was very right when he said colonialism. He actually used the word imperialism. That's not a correct word. You just substitute it with colonialism. He said colonialism is the highest form of capitalism, right? Now, but with the colonies now having become independent, but still being dependent, that is the interesting part. Okay, politically we may have become independent. Politically we may have sovereignty and say we are in control of our own affairs. The fact of the matter is that we are not in control of our economies. Our economies are still burdened with debt. Our revenues are pretty low. Our revenues are pretty low because our servicing of debts is pretty high. If you take the case of African nations, do you know that 97% 97% of the annual GDP, gross domestic product, some people say gross national product, GNP, either is acceptable, but I believe GDP is a better thing. The gross domestic product is the social wealth you're generating. It is from that you draw the per capita income. Okay, so if your GDP is 100, in most African countries, 97 whatever the current, let's call it dollars, because international trade happens in dollars. $97 go to servicing the debts. Okay, there is a thing called a debt trap. What is a debt trap?
Borrowing these developed countries borrowing African countries, sir.
Developed countries borrowing from African countries.
No. These countries giving.
See, the debt trap is, in order to pay one loan, you take another loan.
Yeah.
In order to pay one loan, you have to take another loan. It is like your credit cards. Okay. If you spend too much on your credit card, which is what I once did, then the rate of interest is so high. I don't know if you know this. On a credit card, the monthly interest, the monthly interest is 36% on your outstanding payment. So they'll tell you can pay as little, it's called revolving credit. So they'll say you can pay a minimum of 5% of the total. Now, if you have borrowed a lakh of rupees, what is 5% of a lakh? Somebody tell me.
5,000.
5,000.
Yeah, 5,000. So you put 5,000. Now, 95,000 is going to accrue 36% that month. Does anyone have a calculator? Does anyone have a calculator? How much will 95%, how much will it become with 36% interest by the next month? Anybody with a calculator? Is anybody attempting?
We didn't get you, sir.
Sir, what is the principal amount, sir? 1 lakh?
No, 95,000.
95,000? 60.
95,000. On that you have to pay 36% interest. For 1 month, not for a year. Let me do a calculation.
That will be some 34,000 of interest. Sir.
Yeah. So it'll be 34%. You're right. So when you get your next credit card statement, and even if you haven't spent any more money, the amount you see is not 95,000. The amount you see is 1,30,000. So that's how you get caught into a trap. So you shouldn't use credit cards unless they're absolutely necessary.
Sir, China's debt trap diplomacy in the case of Sri Lanka.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. That'll just take us away from this. That is a part of what you can call Neo-Liberalism. I have a chapter, not a chapter, a section on China. Anyway, so you have this debt trap which is increasing like this. So now they have run out of uh, they have run out of raising debts, and these are creditor nations. Okay, these were the nations that where does the World Bank or the IMF get its money? Where does it get it from? It gets it from these developed economies. Okay, and stagflation basically meant that they had to recover the debts, and countries caught in a debt trap, they are not able to pay you back. What will you do? What will you do? Go to war against them, kill them? What will you do? You can't do anything. You can't do anything. So the Bretton Woods institutions, the Bretton Woods institutions are the World Bank, IMF, and all these. These institutions, you've heard of Bretton Woods, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So the Bretton Woods institutions started exerting pressure on countries saying that you have to open up your economies. You have to open up your economies. Otherwise, your debt your debt will never get paid. And after they opened up their economies, they are paying 97% of their gross domestic product as money, or rather as loans, servicing of loans as it is called. They're paying even till today. This started in the 70s. Till today, they are paying 97%. So that's why you'll see those horrific scenes. I don't know if you should watch Discovery Channel and you should watch National Geographic Channel. You know, there are heart-rending scenes where I have seen an African woman, tribal woman, picking up clay and making a pancake kind of a thing, starting a fire and putting that clay pieces into the fire, cooking the clay, and they eat that. They eat that. That is when I felt so guilty. I said, what kind of life am I leading? There are people like this. So I was overcome by guilt that I'm leading a very comfortable life. I was overcome by guilt. That's how Africa is even today. Most of it, especially the eastern parts. So they are a part of the debt trap, and therefore, when they're still not able to come out of it. And all these members of the Lippmann colloquium, they were saying that you have to go aggressively and collect your debt. You have to collect your debts, ask them to give back. If they can't give you back something, then take something from nature. Take something from nature, which is raw material. So it became neo-colonialism. So it's not neo-liberalism, it's neo-colonialism, which happened. So they suggested laissez-faire economics, withdrawal of the state to the bare minimum functions, and an unfettered laissez-faire and free market economy. And it was at this time that Margaret Thatcher became the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. In these days, she's from the Tory party, the Conservative Party, which supported this whole laissez-faire free market economy. So, what do you find happening in England? You have the abolition of subsidies. Please remember, I talked about Keynesian subsidies. Abolition of all forms of subsidies. No giving of loans to people. Earn your money, no taking loans. That is basically what she was telling people. Take care of yourself. It is not the responsibility of the state or the government to take care of you. Take care of yourself. That is the message she put out. That is the message she put out. And you know what the industry developed at that time? And what kind of entrepreneurs came into being? Any idea? What developed was a certain form of music industry, and the entrepreneurs were drug peddlers. Now, if you go to certain parts of London, like, Soho and Britannia Row, or if you go to some areas which were once industrialized but had become deindustrialized. So you have those big sheds. So what were people doing? They would go there in the night. Okay, these were people who would work in the day, youngsters. They would go there in the night. Parked discreetly near these locations would be a drug peddler. He would give you a menu. You could choose from that. If you want LSD, you could choose that. If you wanted heroin, you could choose that. If you wanted cocaine, you could choose that. So there was this whole list of drugs, including prescription drugs. Prescription drugs are those which are given to people who have what should I say, mental illnesses. And I found out rather late in life that even painkillers, especially this particular molecule called tramadol, is also used as a party drug. Okay, it's used as a party drug. And what does it do? You can't take just tramadol. You have to powder it and put it in vodka. Not just one tablet of tramadol, 2-3 tablets of tramadol, put them in a bottle of vodka, drink it. You get a high. And if you overdose, you die. I came to know of this when my wife was employed in Google. One of their employees died of overdosing. She did this. She took tramadol, had spiked vodka with tramadol, had plenty of it, and didn't wake up again. So the drug industry became a very, very profitable industry. Liquor, instead of going and buying it from sources outside of, from sources in liquor shops, you have bootleg liquor. I don't know if you know what a bootleg liquor. It is illicit. Okay? Anything that is illicit is actually called bootleg. So you have bootleg liquors selling at half the price of what the actual brew would cost. So you have more money to, you have more, money to drink more now. So this heady cocktail of all kinds of drugs, including prescription drugs and alcohol, and that rave and trance music. I've been to pubs and walked out of them for the simple reason that they are horrible. That rave and trance music. It's just senseless sound. But apparently, if you're in a drugged out state, it spaces you out further. It spaces you out further. Apparently, that's the effect it has. So rave and trance music became very, very popular. In all these abandoned, Britannia Row was abandoned. Okay, Soho had parts of it abandoned. And there were these other industrial locations where the sheds which were used for manufacture, due to the collapsing of, or rather due to stagflation, they closed down. So these became locations for parties. And the best part was the state was really being laissez-faire. The state was being really laissez-faire. The police knew, everybody knew what was happening, but they were instructed to leave these people alone. They were instructed to leave these people alone. Otherwise, poverty will come back. So you had a generation of drug addicts. Generation of drug addicts. That is what Thatcherism did in Britain. And then this great man, Ronald Reagan, you know, he was called the Teflon coated president. You people know what is Teflon, right? Hmm? Anybody? Tell me what
No,
is.
sir.
You don't know Teflon?
No, sir.
Women
Car
will know.
painting, sir.
Uh-huh. Sorry, I didn't hear you, Padma.
Coating, sir, for protection.
It's not a coating for protection. It is a non-stick material.
Okay.
You dosa pans, if you don't want to eat with oil, okay, you can make dosas without using oil in a Teflon coated pan. It won't stick. The batter will not stick to the pan. Otherwise, if you do it in a regular pan, then you have to put a lot of oil so that it doesn't stick to it. So he was called the Teflon coated president because nothing stuck to him. All kinds of scandals happened. First and foremost, he launched this whole thing called the Star Wars program. Has anyone heard of it?
No, sir.
The formal name for this is Missile Destruction Program. That was the formal name. But he called it Star Wars because in the 80s, Star Wars, made by George Lucas. You've heard of the Star Wars movie series?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So it was very popular in America. And since America doesn't have a folklore of its own, it's a new country. It doesn't have a folklore. So they have science fiction as their folklore. That is why people like Arthur C. Clarke and what's his name? Isaac Asimov, their science fiction became what folklore was for us. Okay, and this was called the Star Wars program. What did it involve? It involved sending missile destructing satellite equipment into space and protecting America. It's almost like putting an umbrella and protecting it. So, what did he do? He asked for funds from the Congress, told them that the Soviet Union's threat is becoming bigger and bigger, and we have to protect ourselves. So, here it is. It's also called the Missile Defense System Program. Uh, it is also called the Missile Destruction Program, but it is generally called the Star Wars program. So in this, what do you see? You see him asking for truckloads of dollars. Did he spend a single pie on a satellite or anything? No, he didn't. He didn't do anything like that. He did the bailing out of corporations and took a page out of Thatcher, and the drug industry grew again. LSD, which was banned, was available. You could do it. Even today, if you're caught with ganja in anywhere, you will be considered either a drug peddler or a druggie. So you'd have to go to jail in India. In America, it is freely allowed, not by the Constitution, not by any this thing. The consensus, like we don't wear helmets, nobody bothers. You can freely smoke, they call ganja marijuana. Okay, Marijuana. It's marijuana, it's a Spanish word, but the Americans call it marijuana. So you can smoke that. Nobody will stop you. And they even tell you that smoking marijuana is better than smoking cigarettes. It does less damage to your lungs and to your heart, but it damages your brain. That they don't tell you. So even today, you can freely get these. You can get these, go to a rock show, you'll smell marijuana. So the drug economy, as it came to be called, grew. And those people who were erstwhile workers who lost their jobs were initially conduits for selling illicit stuff, and later on they themselves became uh, they themselves became what do you say, sellers, not just conduits. They became businessmen. Most of the drugs, by the way, used to come from Cuba, Mexico, or if you want to sound like a Mexican, call it Mexico. They were from these countries. The route, Florida, Miami. Nobody looked in that direction. Nobody looked in that direction. People still don't look in that direction. Maybe LSD will get you into a bit of trouble because that's a synthetic drug. But now they are also calling it ganja. Huh? They don't call it marijuana. They call it ganja. So it is a drug economy that came into being. That and the US stopped under Ronald Reagan. It stopped paying its dues to the United Nations organization. Every country, developed country, had to contribute. Britain and Ronald Reagan, I mean, Mrs. Thatcher and Mr. Reagan, they were a tag team, much like George W. Bush and Tony Blair later on. Okay, George Bush launched a war on Iraq saying that they have weapons of mass destruction. I don't know if nothing seems to have been found. If they have found, I don't know what they have done with. It's like good old Modi telling us, I'm collecting black money. That's what demonetization was supposed to be. It's a sinister program. I'll talk about that tomorrow. So where is the black money? He said, I'm going to put it into the accounts of poor people. I'll go to Switzerland, get the bank account details. I'll go to Cocos Islands and get the details. I'll go to the Bahamas and get the details. I'll go to Monaco and get the details. Where are the details? Where is the black money? So we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat nonsense. There's nothing Atmanirbhar about it. Anyway, so I'll stop here now. I have to attend that other, it's a mandatory meeting and I don't want to be late for that. So if you have any questions, save them. Please write them down and ask me tomorrow. Okay, tomorrow I'll go into the Indian economy and how an ancient global, not ancient, a very old practice of globalism of the negative variety came to be called a wonderful new thing in the 1990s. So tomorrow I'll go to that. Maybe I'll just, in order to connect, I'll connect the dots with Margaret Thatcher and Ronald Reagan. And we can, once we finish with 90s, when we talk about the 2000s, we can talk about George W. Bush Jr. and Tony Blair. Okay, thank you very much. And I'm sorry I'm rushing out like this. So, all right, I'll see you tomorrow then. If you have any questions, I'm sure you do, please write them down and ask me tomorrow.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, sir.
Thank you.